Hey, a quick word before you folks revolutionize the teaching of social studies. Now, we know an online conference isn't quite the same as seeing each other in person. We can't pass out lanyards with inspirational quotes on them, but when we do it this way, you can wear pajamas and no one will know. So I guess it evens out. Anyway, we are thrilled you're here. And while the conference is free, we could not put on this kind of event without help from a lot of people. Leaders from Arizona, Maryland, Ohio, Oregon, Utah, and Washington, the World History Association, were all essential in making this event happen. So, if you enjoy this conference as much as we think you will, do us a favor. Take a moment to join your local state council for the social studies. Join the WHA. It isn't much, but it makes a huge difference. Check out our contributors page for details.
Hello, everyone. It's time for our second live discussion of the day, engaging conversations. I can tell you from personal experience, any conversation with Jayson Wilkinson, whom you just met and who happens to be the moderator for this session, is going to be engaging. In addition to being a co-MC of this very conference, Jayson is OER Project's Senior Manager of Professional Development. He's an adjunct professor at American University, where he teaches elementary social studies methods in the School of Education. And previously, he served as the social studies manager for DC Public Schools, an Education Pioneers Fellow, and a member of the National Urban Fellows America's Leaders of Change cohort. For this discussion, Jayson will be engaging with Ann Koschmider and Matt Bell. Ann has taught world history at the high school level for 16 years. She holds a master's degree in curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and is a co-author for the Michigan Open Book Project. Matt Bell is a world history teacher at Crystal Springs Upland School in Hillsborough, California. His life's ambition is to produce a rock opera about the many lives of Thomas Paine. I would absolutely buy tickets to that, Matt. And I could monologue all day, but if we're going to talk about engaging conversations, I better leave it to Jayson, Ann, and Matt. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Maheen. So first of all, I am so glad to be joined by Ann and Matt today. This would be an amazing conversation. I have been doing my research for weeks and weeks for this chat. And the one thing that kind of kept on coming back to me is how I was when I was much younger. I was a much quieter person. I always felt that the worst thing that could possibly happen to me was being called on in class, to be invited to a conversation. So I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of evolved my thinking on this, but I still love to go back to that idea, engaging conversations. And in this one, I think vocabulary is paramount. So I'm super curious. I want to pose this to you guys, and we can start off with Ann and go over to Matt. What does an engaging conversation look like in your classroom?
Thanks, Jayson, and good afternoon, everyone. I would say that an engaging conversation really has two elements. The first of which transpires within your prescribed classroom time period. And when that's taking place, you're going to notice that students are giving their full attention to their peers, that they care about the content, they're emotionally and intellectually invested. But I would also assert that the ultimate engaging conversation is that which continues beyond the classroom. Once I had a really great discussion-based lesson going on, and our power went out in the whole area of our town. So for most teachers, their teaching just came to a standstill because they were using their computers, their smart boards, all of that. But because we were discussion-based, we just kept right on rolling. And actually 4 or 5 staff members popped into the classroom like, "What are you doing? You still learning?" And I was like, "Get out of here. We got something going on. Don't mess this up." Or as a social studies teacher, I really love it when I hear from parents that the content of our conversations in class has made it home to the dinner table. Or when my students come back the next day or the next week and say, "Remember what we were talking about? I saw this news article and it really reminded me of that." Or "I read this thing in a book and it really reminded me of that." And for me, that's just really what we're always striving for.
I love that. Conversations come back to the dinner table. All right. Matt, the ball's yours. What do you think? What does an engaging conversation look like in your classroom?
Yeah, thanks, Jayson, and thanks for the opportunity. I think that the biggest thing for me in terms of what makes for an engaging conversation is one that I don't need to participate in anymore as a teacher. If I've organized myself out of a job, I think I've done pretty well. If the students can carry on the conversation and they're really pushing to find their voice in those conversations and supporting one another, I think that's really a great sign of engaging conversation. And the other thing that, as I've been thinking about this too, Jason, about this topic is the non-verbal stuff. I think body language, if students are leaning forward, if they're taking notes, if they're making eye contact, these are the things that really tip off to me that the conversation is engaging for the students. That's the other thing too, is that when I've been thinking about all of the track talks, some of the great track talks, I find that there's one thing, if it's engaging for me, but is it engaging for the students, right? And so I think if I don't need to be part of it, and if I see their body language seems engaged, then that's a pretty good sign for me.
Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper on that. So I am super curious, how might these engaging conversations differ across the K-12 spectrum? And I'm sorry, we can start off with Matt.
Yeah, well, I think I could speak more to the high school level.
Sure.
I think, Jason, you might be able to speak a little bit more articulately about the lower grades, but I think with secondary students, middle school, high school, I know that, this past year, we've all had to struggle with making an engaging conversation online, at least a forum for that, and how to reach out to students who are typically more reluctant to speak up. So I think that there's lots of ways. I think, this could probably come up later, but Dan Fouts in his track talk had a terrific model. I really appreciate those talks that have a real direct lesson plan available for me to adapt. And I thought Dan Fouts did a great job talking about the structure of the text and getting to the claim. What's the claim of the author? What's the counterclaim? And then hitting them with the essential question that you perhaps started the unit with. So that type of stuff has been really helpful, and I'd recommend everyone check out Dan Fouts' track talk to help online. I think that perhaps we're always looking more towards a Socratic seminar, right? That sort of thing, which is what I prefer. But one of the things that I've really been able to reflect on in this past year is how to structure those engaging conversations differently. There's other things too, and I think we'll talk about this more, as well as some of the shyer students, which I also think was Megan Schultz's topic. Yeah. But what I call a silent auction. So students are writing and then they pass the paper around and engage one another. So I don't think the engaging conversations always necessarily need to be verbal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. You don't always be verbal. I love that. Okay, and can you jump in? So I know you've got a very specific expertise. Can you let us know what are some of the strategies that you employ in your grade bands for engaging conversations?
Yeah, I'm definitely a type A kind of gal. And I see in the chat, it looks like some of you feel me on that. It's hard to just go all in and relinquish complete control. So really, I think what's best is to start with first establishing discussion norms. There was some great conversation about that in the previous live discussion about young citizens, having students participate in the creation of those norms. So just really be clear in your expectations about what students are expected to do and how they should participate in that conversation. And in the younger grades, like for my sophomores, for example, the first time they engage in a debate, I have a very clear structure. Like, this is how many minutes you get for your opening comments, for your rebuttals, for your planning time, for your closing arguments. And in preparation for that, I give students a graphic organizer that has an outline with some sentence starters. So they know exactly what they should be doing to set up claims and to back up those claims with evidence. I find that having that level of structure really helps to keep the conversation focused, targeted, and academic. So I expect that at the lower grade levels, having the structure of some pre-planning, some graphic organizers, some sentence starters would behoove teachers and students as well. But again, Jason, I know you're our third grade guy here, so would love to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, this is long ago, I guess, but I think there's two different parts of the system that stick out in my mind to kind of build that space for students. I think the first one is it starts well before the actual conversation happens in your classroom, where those moments happen. You should put the energy and the effort into building a classroom culture that's strong, where a student can feel empowered in those moments to either succeed with the support of their peers, or to be challenged or to fall short, and to know that it's okay, because that's what adults understand about the world, and trying to cultivate those spaces and those learning opportunities for students is a big part of it. But in the actual conversation itself, one of my mentors growing up told me a great classroom conversation, a great classroom itself isn't these extremes. It's not dangerous minds. It's not, there's no by captain or captain by captain moments. Or, I mean, there may be some of those, but for the most part, what we aim for is being an educator who goes around and kind of, the classroom is full of spinning tops, and you put a little bit of a spin on each of those conversations, those students. You don't get the whole thing running, you don't stop it down. You really allow them to see themselves in a conversation, to engage with others, and to use probing questions, to use your facilitation, your instruction, to kind of keep those conversations going and to make them deeper and stronger. So that feels not too different from what I would assume a secondary educator thinks about, but I don't know. Those were the ones that stuck with me the most, and I've always tried to go back to that, whether I'm working with third graders or adults. I love that. Cool. So I was listening to Dustin Hood's talk, and this one's titled Democracy and Dialogue. If you haven't checked it out, I would strongly suggest. But he shares a really captivating story about his grandfather and how his grandfather felt that his voice wasn't important. He had a very specific expertise in construction, but for him, it didn't feel like that was something that kind of ventured out of his box into like polite society, I would suppose. So my question to you is, what implications does this talk, do the lessons we learned from that talk have on your classroom, on educators as a whole? And we can start off with Anne, and we can bump over to Matt afterwards.
Yeah, that was a great track talk, and I just had such strong emotions as I was watching that, because it reminded me of a student that I had in class this year. Mm-hmm. And academically, he struggled. Great kid, really nice kid. He did not have an inherent love for history, which is okay. But he just really struggled with motivation, especially as we were going through these different schedules. He just had a hard time feeling really connected to school. At the beginning of the year, I saw a lot of behaviors from him, like face mask up in a way like to kind of hide his face, and like hood pulled down, like he just wanted to hide and disengage from class, which made me so sad. So I really tried to meet him where he was at, which is what I found myself wishing that a teacher had done for Dustin's grandfather. So with this kid, we talked about football, we talked about his future desire to work in auto mechanics, and we talked about his job at a local restaurant. Now, those three topics weren't things that I had like a huge vested interest in, but I developed one because I really wanted to connect with this kid. And so every day, those were the three things that we started talking about. And eventually we gained enough of a rapport between us that I saw some really great progress in him. He started to complete a lot more of the coursework. And once he found some confidence and some success in that, I started to see such a dramatic shift in him. He went from trying to hide beneath his hoodie to like starting the classroom conversation every day, which was so exciting to see. And on our hybrid schedule, he was only required to attend every other day, but he was coming in on his off days to try to improve his performance in school. And for me, that was just a complete 180-degree shift. I was so excited to see that. And I just found myself really wishing that Dustin's grandfather had had somebody looking out for him and caring to connect with him as much as, in a way that this kid could have succeeded, that he could have succeeded as well.
I love that. It really stuck with me, the idea of kind of these small victories along the way to kind of lead to this larger success. Great. Matt, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think when I watched Dustin's talk, it really, I think I put this in the blurb from my track talk, was that the first thing I learned in my teacher training program at UC Santa Cruz was that there's a distinction between school and education, and that we're all constantly learning. And so schooling becomes this much more formal process and the conventions. And so if in school we can try to bring every aspect of a child's education into that room, and have that conversation. I think that's always great. There's also one of the other things that strikes me too is that it's some of the best tangents that we can go on in a classroom when we're talking about something is when immigrant students can speak to their family's experience and add a bit more to that. And anytime we can take the history and make it slightly more personal or add characters and try to understand people more, and history is about people making decisions and facing uncertainty. I think that always makes for a better conversation.
I really appreciate that. Sticks with me. My whole family's from Trinidad, and I'm the first of many of my family to do a lot of things. But coming up in schooling, I never saw myself in education. I never heard any stories or narratives about Caribbean communities. Like, it just wasn't a thing that ever came up. And I think being able to kind of have a teacher that helps you to include yourself or to advocate for your background in those spaces could be really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So I would love to get down into some of the nitty gritty of you guys. Like, I've talked to you guys, I've listened to your talks, and I have so many questions about how you guys go about the day-to-day. I will start off with Matt. Matt, I'm super curious about your history club. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I guess without going over too much of the ground that I actually in the talk, but I had a really nerdy group of students who are into their history, not necessarily interested in becoming history majors, but they wanted to go a little bit deeper, get outside the textbook. And so they had approached me about kickstarting this type of club. And I was really happy that they weren't just looking for a leadership role to put on their college application, that they actually seemed genuinely interested. And so we were able to reach out to our, fortunately, at the school I was at where we started this, there was a regional state college right next door to us. And so we were able to reach out to the history faculty, and they jumped all over the opportunity to work with us, which really surprised me. And bringing those professors over really took it to another place. So it wasn't just students listening to me more. It wasn't just students sitting around talking about whatever they might be geeking out at a particular time. But these professors really elevated the whole notion of what we could do and provided a real structure for how we can talk about history, which is slightly different than what I'm trying to do in the classroom as the instructor. And so students were then able to take that model that the professors were demonstrating for them, and they started giving presentations and about passion projects that the students had. So, and it really, even though it seems more formal in the structure, so I always insist with the professors as well as with my students, like, let's start with a thesis. Like, what are you going to talk about here?
Right.
And, you know, what do you have you have to bring some evidence to bear here. But the conversations become more natural as we became more practiced at this, a little bit more informal, and the professors were at ease. And when it becomes slightly less formal in tone, then everyone gets super excited and enthusiastic, and they seem much more engaged. So I really think that our history club owes a tremendous debt to sustain itself by collaborating with the local history faculty at our neighboring college. And I think, again, as I mentioned in the track talk, I think that this is really available to all of us. We probably have a state regional college relatively close, regardless of what state we're in. Those state regional colleges almost always are sort of the teacher accreditation programs. And so I think that there's usually an instructional focus. And so I think that it's possible, and it doesn't need to be all the time. It doesn't, perhaps once or twice a term, if you invite a professor over, but that really changes the whole nature of it.
Matt, I want to push you on one thing. You mentioned the formality of tone and that kind of dropping a bit for those conversations really flourish. Tell me about that. What does that look like? What does it sound like for those tones, that conversation to kind of lose its formality?
I think once, in our forum, if there's a professor there, once the professor starts to, they're incredibly comfortable, and so they're speaking at ease. That professor is also not coming over having to think about grading, right, or the midterm. So they're talking about something that it's either their their own research is in formation, or they're thinking about an instructional strategy for their own classroom. And so, but the enthusiasm just comes out. Anytime I find that there's more enthusiasm, then everyone becomes more relaxed, and the whole thing becomes more engaging. So I think, to answer your question more directly, if we're not talking about history, and if there isn't a grade attached at the end of some sequence, some unit, and if you bring over an expert, then everything becomes much more comfortable. And then that's when the enthusiasm really starts to stand out. Did I answer your question there?
No, it was good. I appreciate that. I think I'm always wrapping my head around how we can kind of like lower the walls a little bit and allow students to see themselves engaged more directly. And that was a good bit of strategy for that. And I'm coming after you. I've got some questions. So like, I know you spent the last semester back teaching in person, and I am super curious. Like, we know the last 18 months has been challenging. It's probably the lightest way to put it. But how did you see those engaging conversations change when your students returned to you that last semester?
Well, the first transition back to school for students was honestly really, really awkward. We were totally online from like early November through Christmas break. We came back in January. And in that time, we were on trimesters, so we switched schedules. So I actually had a combination of students that I knew previously, which is fantastic, but also some students that I was meeting for the first time online. So when they came back in January, there were a few that I was like trying to match the kid in front of me to their picture in my LMS, because if they really weren't using their cameras, or if they were mostly just responding in the chat, I felt like I didn't know them very well. So I had this really strange feeling like it was sort of the first day of school all over again. And that was also the advent of our hybrid schedule of students attending every other day.
Right.
So, students they were nervous, they were uncomfortable. Some of them were a little concerned about being back in a school building during the pandemic. And some of them just really missed their friends, and they weren't sure how this was going to look going back to school, because we've been through a few different schedule permutations. Right. So students were like strangely quiet. Even students that I knew and had me for class for a year or 2 years already were strangely quiet. So that's what I really focused on in my TED Talk, was strategies that I used to draw some conversation out of them. However, because we had that limited class time, I didn't ever want to do it at the expense of content. I still wanted to teach as much as I could reasonably teach, and do it while preserving the prioritization of social and emotional learning.
I really appreciate that. I think that's a thoughtful way to approach it. So I am really deep into controversy. I love controversial conversations. I have clear, fond memories of engaging in debates with new friends in coffee shops in college. So with that kind of spirit in mind, I'm curious, like, how does controversy arrive in your classrooms in the formats you kind of laid out? So Matt, if I had to guess, there's got to be a fair amount of controversial topics that come up in history club, in your class work outside of that, and you can't lock the current events of the world outside of your spaces. So to the two of you, I guess I'm going to start off with Matt to get the ball rolling, but I'm just curious, how do controversial topics make their way into your spaces?
Yeah, I guess the initial question would be, what's controversial? And I think often if we start with norms, as Anne mentioned earlier, about how to engage one another, that we're focusing on ideas, not on people, that we don't make quick assumptions about the speaker. If we know their politics prior to the conversation, that we're not automatically going to put ideas into that you're thinking prior to hearing them, if that makes sense. So there's no prejudice, I guess, to what you think someone's going to say. So if we focus on the ideas rather than the person. I also like the school that I'm moving over to now. They have a value that let's always assume the the best intention of the speaker, which I really like. I think one of the ways to short circuit then controversy is, do you have evidence? Do you have clear evidence? And in this case, primary sources. And if it's being offered, if your ideas then are being offered as an interpretation of the evidence, that makes it easier. So it doesn't become controversial in the sense of a shouting match or everyone becomes uncomfortable. I think it becomes a controversy in that where it's a controversy in that there are different interpretations of evidence. And so some of our professors, the instructional strategies that they've tried to bring over for History Club is to actually present two different historians' interpretations of things. But it doesn't make any sense if there isn't evidence. I think many document-based question formats can be done in this way too. Right. So I think that perhaps we're initially worried about, are we going to be uncomfortable, or is this a controversial topic because this is what I've read on Twitter? And it's really about how we're engaging one another, and are we rooted in evidence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and notwithstanding though, again, what Anne had suggested earlier, we sort of have to have rules of engagement before we have that engaging conversation, I think, and assuming the best intentions of one another.
Interesting. Okay, rules of engagement. I love that. I like the idea of using evidence. My wonder is, do you think that slows down those engaging moments, those conversations?
That is a great question, because often the best insights come when you least expect it, I think, in those conversations, or when you can see on the face of a student that, aha. I think, I don't think I would ever step in and say, look, you can't say that because you don't have the evidence. And then that's when those conversations can break down into like what the debate club kids, right? They're mainly they're trying to get one over on one another. And so I do think that engaging conversations and to get to a level of comfort for as many students as possible, we do have to let it flow a bit. And if a student is introducing something that they don't necessarily feel comfortable with the evidence, or it's an idea in formation that had just sprung up spontaneously, I think you're right that you have to be mindful and of letting that conversation flow. And also, it just popped into my head when you said that, is that these conversations are not the beginning and the end of the conversation. That this might be, so, what am I taking away from this conversation, and I'm going to go learn on my own, or how are we going to build on that? And so, maybe bringing a certain amount of humility into it, like I have more to learn here, or does that make sense? I think if we think about the whole thing as, oh, I'm now an expert at the end of this sort of thing.
I love it. I think that idea of humility and vulnerability in conversations is such a valuable way to kind of help both sides understand that there's still more reading, more learning to do. And I'm curious, same question, how has controversy found its way into your spaces? I know you spent part of the year online, part of the year doing that hybrid model. How's it popped up?
Well, one thing I will say about this past year is that there were aspects of it that were liberating, because there was no reasonable expectation that you were going to have a 100% normal year and teach all things that you normally teach. So if you know that you're not going to cover all of the details and the depth that you want to, I felt like a little bit more free to bring in current events. Right. And to recenter the class around historical thinking skills. Okay. So that we're really talking about doing history. So I kept turning time and time again to skills like sourcing analysis and contextualization. I mentioned earlier that January is when my kids came back to the classroom. Well, January 6th was the date of the attack on the United States Capitol. So, I said to kids, like, I really get the sense that we're living history right now. And I think it's important that we talk about this. So that was a little bit uncertain for me, knowing that I was dealing with this really quiet group of kids and I wasn't sure how those conversations were going to go. So I would start by playing just a little clip of CNN 10 or showing some content from allsides.org. I knew I had students at both ends of the political spectrum in my class, and I just really wanted to model for them how we can have a respectful and academic conversation. So we just kept referring back to those historical thinking skills. And one of the last topics that we learned in person first try was Enlightenment revolutions. Right. So we brought back a lot of those ideas about individual rights, what we can expect from our government, and how we should act as a citizen who's active in our government.
That's super interesting, man. Someone who's a DC resident, it has been tough trying to figure out how to grapple with all of what's gone on for the past couple of months, but specifically the insurrection that we experience here. So I really appreciate you spending time to kind of grapple with that with your students. I'm curious, so that all sounds like it's formal, and I love it. There's like a purpose there, and things are on, going on according to plan. How do you engage with students when those conversations go off track, when they get a little loud, a little angry?
I'm going to say prevention is the best medicine for that. Again, to go back to having norms for discussion and community building and how you treat your classmates. But of course, every once in a while, you're going to have some issues that arise. So rather than having an emotional reaction, what I really try to do is respond with something like, oh, why do you think that? Or, oh, I hadn't heard that. Where did you get that information from? To try to really push kids to come to their own conclusions. If I think that their comments may be a little bit out there, I think it's going to be more powerful for them to arrive at that conclusion on their own, or maybe even for their peers to chime in on that and question them further. I think it's really important not to shame that student. And in the last discussion, there's a really powerful comment about how social media has made us sometimes hesitant to say something because we're so afraid of the backlash if we're wrong. Right. And how important it is that our classrooms are a space where kids are comfortable saying, I don't know. I would rather have a kid say, I don't know, I'm uncertain, I'd like to learn more. Because sometimes when they feel nervous or put on the spot, that's when they make the comment that is inappropriate. So I think in laying the groundwork and making sure that students feel very comfortable saying, I'm not sure about that, but I'd like to listen and learn more. I mean, that's the vision for what adults to do, right? Right. So it has to start somewhere. And I hope that somewhere can be in our social studies classrooms.
I appreciate that so much. I have so seldom in my life engaged with folks who felt comfortable saying, I don't know, or let me get back to you. And I think if we can start to cultivate that instinct in students, we're gonna, wake up one day to a much better world. I really appreciate that. So I was looking back through the videos, and there's one in particular that kind of jumped out at me. We've got, well, I guess there's a couple, but in the context of this question, there's one that jumped out at me. Lacey Nank and Kay Longwell's talk on how to engage students in ways they least expect. There's this idea that came up of bringing in kind of non-traditional inputs into the classroom. In this case, it was narrative fiction into the exploration of that class's APO's history coursework to help them kind of add more, to be able to pull more information out of subjects that could have been far off or felt distant at times. I'm curious, in both of your spaces, when we're thinking about these engaging conversations, have you ever brought in inputs, non-traditional resources to help students engage in those conversations? And we can start off with Anne, and we can bump over to Matt afterwards.
Perfect. So I just found myself really wishing that I could be a fly on the wall in their classroom because they seem to have such a wonderful co-teaching dynamic. That was really great. So if you haven't watched that talk yet, I would really encourage you to do so. Pulling in those texts really reminded me a little experiment I did with some of my AP World kids. I have a combo of juniors and seniors, and our seniors graduate early. So I had about 2.5 weeks left with my juniors. They learned the whole AP World curriculum, the test was done. We just had time to be flexible and to really have students allow some input into what we did. And I had this wonderful group of 5 kids. 4 of them were readers, they're discussers, wonderful. And then I had my one wild card. He is a kid that I was so proud of him for taking this class. He was the first in his family to graduate from high school. And here he is taking AP World and going on to college. Such an amazing kid. Also such an introverted kid. I think he sincerely could go through his whole school day and say 10 words, tops. So we decided we're going to do a book club. And again, 4 out of 5 of my kids I know is going to be great for them. but my one wild card, I don't know how this is gonna go. So I consulted my neighboring English teachers. How do I do a book club? I don't know, I never talked about it. We decided that lit circles were gonna be the way to go.
Okay.
Everybody had a role. We rotated the roles. I had a role too. I sat down with the kids, like staff members would pop in the room, like, where's Mrs. K? Like they didn't realize that, like I'm in there, I'm in the lit circle. And we did the book leaf, which is like 463 pages or something in 2.5 weeks. Like it was a lot of book. But these kids were so phenomenal with it. And my one wildcard student, he started talking about things in our discussions that haven't happened yet. And I was rereading the book. So I was like, wait, I don't think that happened yet, but maybe I'm misremembering. And then the other kids came in like, no, that hasn't happened yet. So my wildcard student is reading ahead for these discussions. He's talking more in this book club than he has his entire high school career.
Okay.
And then he also confessed to us that was the first time he ever finished a book in high school out of all the books he'd been assigned. So I would say if anybody's nervous about that, like just go for it. I'm very open with my kids about, I've never done this before. Let's see how it goes. Because I think that makes them more likely to take risks as well.
I got you. I love that. We get so few chances to really sit down and thumb through books that those of us with kids with busy lives, Audible has become a thing. But I recently reinvested the time into sitting down and thumbing through a paper book, and it was so nice. And being able to find folks online that want to discuss it was even better. So I really appreciate it. Shout out to our book club for Just Mercy. It was really great to be able to talk to them about that. Matt, same question to you. I'm curious. So like thinking about these kind of inputs, these non-traditional resources we can bring into our spaces to kind of bolster those conversations. What experiences have you had in that?
Yeah, well, I first wanted to say that I think Ms. Knapp and Ms. Longwell want to be known as Knapwell. I don't know if you saw the sign above them.
That was adorable.
They had merged into one figure. Yeah, I think that the obvious, fortunately, when I was in college, the history professors there were not afraid to bring in fiction, historical fiction. No, well, I guess not historical fiction, but you'd read Voltaire. You read a short novel or novella, something's that early print culture. And so I think this can be intimidating. Oftentimes, can you fit this in, right? If we're really up against it with scope and sequence. But I think, for instance, I have in the past, and I'm being encouraged this year again to read Candide by Voltaire. And anytime, I think that what Knapwell incorporated, I think anytime we can create real characters, right? If we can really get to know a historical figure, it makes it easier for the students to tap into and develop a certain amount of empathy or historical understanding. Also, it occurred to me that I only did this once, but I know other teachers who have done this really successfully. I think some of the English teachers actually do this as well, but they'll watch a historical film, I don't know, Braveheart, Master and Commander, and then have students actually see where there are historical inaccuracies. So again, that might be fairly time consuming as well, but students can kind of collaborate in groups on that. I have a colleague who effectively did some fan fiction, like, how would an actual historical figure interact in a certain kind of conversation. Finally, I would say, I don't know if this would count as non-traditional or unusual, and I don't want to steal thunder from another track here, but there's this blossoming field of graphic histories, right? And so, and I think there's quite a few of these now. So there's not only John Lewis's March, or at least inspired by John Lewis's March, multi-volumes, but there's also the Oxford series, where there's, I think, at least a dozen of them now of graphic histories. And often when it comes from an academic publisher like that, there's a lot of information about the historical method in appendices, right? Or actually providing transcripts that was interpreted in the comic book portion. I think that we often, mostly when I talk to teachers about this, they might have used Mouse to talk about the Holocaust, the Shoah, but there's so much more now that's available that frankly probably just requires a lot of summer prep by a teacher to figure out how to incorporate that stuff in. But I think when I've used it, the students have really responded to that sort of thing. So I think graphic histories is absolutely a viable, growing, and will be increasingly more of a significant part of our instruction here in the next couple decades.
No, I totally agree. Shout out to Trevor Getz, Dr. Trevor Getz, who's our resident expert of graphic biographies here at the OER Project. He has a training going on at the end of August, if anyone's interested. But I want to jump into the questions. We've got a couple that came in over the last 30 so minutes, and I want to make sure we are addressing them. So first one that came out from Alan Stout. How do you evaluate engagement? Is engagement enough in its own right, or is some engagement better or more valuable than others? So start off with like a basic section of that question, like how do you engage? I'm sorry, how do you evaluate engagement? And I'm sorry, we can start with, if you don't, Matt, you're already going, so.
Yeah, sorry. I think the nature of Dan Fout's, his track talk, getting to students answering an essential question. So I think, not only do we typically have a mantra of try to write as much as possible, write every day in class, even if it's just in some sort of journal or exit ticket, things like that, really good teaching that I often miss. But I think if students are writing their thoughts before we leave, while they're fresh in their mind, or are they posing new questions? What questions do they have at the end of the conversation, which have come up? And so I think, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, I need you to answer our essential question for the unit now. But just having students reflect on what they've taken away, which is also another way of including some of the quieter students.
Great.
So yeah, I think that's one way to evaluate. Ultimately though, asking the students, how did this go for you? Right? Do you think that this is adding to your understanding? Not did you enjoy it? Not we're doing something different today, but do you feel like this really, I think the self-evaluation is important there.
Okay, so we're using self-evaluation to kind of assess out whether or not they were engaged in, what parts. Okay, and same question to you. Curious, when you're thinking about that kind of engagement, do you also factor in kind of the student-to-student engagement? I'm always thinking to myself, one of the best sessions I attended years ago, kind of really put this idea in my head that students learn most when it's student-to-student conversations and, less of the kind of teacher lecturing to a group of students. So I'm curious, is there a space in your kind of evaluation system to kind of gauge that kind of engagement as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do also want to give a shout out to Megan Schultz, because she talked about action research in her track talk about how much and why students were or were not participating in class. And gosh, the statistics that she shared, I just thought, were you pulling my students, Megan, or did you secretly sneak into my classroom and ask these questions? Because I thought that she revealed some really universal truths about how students will refrain from engagement because they feel like they don't know the answer, right, or they're afraid to take a chance. So, and sometimes if things are kind of quiet, I just ask kids, like, what's working, what's not working? And I think really our kids want to be heard. So just being given the platform to give that response is really valuable. And I would also assert that there are a lot of different ways for a student to be engaged. Sometimes we have this conception that you're only participating if you're speaking up in a full group discussion. And I just don't think that's the case. In the past year, we've learned a lot more about online platforms, online discussions, Flipgrid, written responses. Sometimes I have kids who have really brilliant ideas, but I feel like I get to know them the most through their written work. Like, I don't love grading a heap of essays, but what gets me through it are those kids who have really brilliant things to say. And I try to give them really descriptive feedback and comment back to them in writing too, because I see that that's how they want to engage, which I think is perfectly fine.
I love it. And this is kind
Jayson,
of that same, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Jayson, can I just add to that very quickly?
Please.
Something struck me is that I think the most engaging conversations I have as a teacher is one-on-one with students. Okay. Particularly with that 15-year-old boy skater who he's just like, I'm not doing this, right, in class. But if I catch them one-on-one, and then they drop all this brilliant analysis of the stuff, so sometimes there's this pose which gets in the way for a lot of students. Say, I'm not going to play ball here, but that doesn't mean they're not thinking. And so I think providing all of these different outlets in writing, I think, is what we focus on. but just trying to like follow up with the kid individually in office hours or something and say, hey, what did you think of that? No, I don't know. But you push them a bit, and then it turns out this kid's, got a lot to say about it.
Yeah, no, I think that sticks with me too. This reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend maybe about a week ago. We were debating whether or not it was appropriate to use TikTok in the classroom, specifically to like allow students to use that to kind of submit their work. Maybe there's a moment where you're allowing them to kind of design something. But it struck me that like we are, as educators, inherently going to be older than the folks that we work with primarily. And we're always going to be behind the curve. And I'm really curious, have you seen technology, whether it's TikTok or anything else, kind of make its way into your grading book in a way that was supportive of engaging conversations? And we can start off with Anne.
Yeah, I'll joke about it, a little self-deprecating humor, never hurts. I'll talk to kids about what they're seeing on the TikTok toes or the Snap Champs these days. But I will try to channel that in a positive way for an assignment. They can make like an Instagram feed for a post-classical world traveler, or I've had kids go on scavenger hunts, like using the Goose Chase app, which is really fun. Or before I discovered that, I would allow them to take pictures and make a Snap story on their scavenger hunt, which actually engaged some conversations because other kids are looking at their stories.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing in class today? So that actually was quite the anticipatory set, I have to say. So yeah, I'm always cautious about that because of equity. Like not every kid has a cell phone,
right? And
parents have different opinions about social media access. So I just try to be really cognizant about that and know my kids and know what the limits are, but still, interject some fun and relevance as well.
Matt, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I try to, I'm not exactly a Luddite, but I try to avoid technology as much as possible. Just like, I guess I'm becoming a curmudgeonly old teacher or something, but
nothing wrong with that.
But when I started teaching 10 years ago, it was sort of hot to have kids make a Facebook page for some historical figure, that sort of thing. But in the last couple of years, there's this very, you cannot be engaging on social media with kids at all, period. And I know that's taken away a lot of tools for a lot of teachers who thought they were really on the head of the curve there. I did, however, just discover in my new school, they encourage the use of an app called Remind, which I'd never heard of, which I'm sure everyone else who's listening has. But
for those who haven't, not me, I definitely know what it is. But
so what I understand, and I don't know if a school or a district has to actually subscribe, but basically it's like a chat app, but student phone numbers and that they're not shared. So the student is kind of posting, not anonymously exactly, but there's no personal information which is being offered. So I'm kind of excited to try that out.
Cool. All right, so I've got a few specific questions for individuals from our question answer. So first one, let's go with, and this one's going to be directed to Anne. In your video, you emphasize that students should coach or praise each other. How do you promote that kind of positive interaction?
Yeah, that's some vernacular that I took away from a tribes training I did years ago, which is all about building classroom community. And sometimes those soft skills in life we have to practice. It's not always inherently valuable to kids. So coaching or praising just really emphasizes that every kid in the classroom is there to support each other. It can be daunting if you feel like you got partnered up with like the smart kid, somebody who's more knowledgeable than you, when, of course, kids all have their strengths. So I just try to really make it comforting and accessible for every kid to engage in the conversation and know that it's a safe space where they're not going to be insulted or belittled if they don't know the right answer, because none of us has all of the answers. So I will usually grab a student from the class and do a little modeling. Again, interject some self-deprecating humor, like take the stigma away from that, and show them like how to be really kind and supportive and appreciative, because that's, again, what I want for our society at large. So it's got to start somewhere.
I love that. The language of support. I think teaching that it's never too early, right, to start dropping those seeds in the classes. So Matt, this one's for you. So the question we have is, how would you recommend starting your own history club?
Yeah, if I had some, I could probably get published if I could come up with some brilliant way of doing this, because the obvious answer is have brilliant kids. But I think, I think it needs to be student led. So even if you're as a teacher and interested in starting something like this, I think reaching out to a core group of students to be the leaders and to set the agenda, what kind of topics would they like to discuss? So I think if you start with a core group of students and try to keep it student focused, student led, student organized as much as possible. Of course, at my old school where we started it, there was this whole rigmarole to get the club officially registered and all that. So we tried to stay away from that until the last minute. But again, I think reaching out directly to the faculty of a neighboring college, start with the department head and see if they're responsive. Look through the faculty pages and research interests of some of the individual faculty at your local state university, and see if there's something. I find that what works best in terms of faculty presentations is if they're talking about something that they're passionate about as a research interest, maybe something that's in formation, but doesn't sit directly on top of stuff you're learning in class.
Okay.
If it's just adjacent, so that students can make those connections, that makes for and students can bring that up and make those connections in the process. The way I think that we really kickstarted a recruitment drive for ours was we actually invited 2 professors to come over and debate one another. And so they had a debate. I think it was in America and Empire. And so that we had like 80 kids turn out for that.
Sure.
And so from that, we use that as a foundation. So I think if you have a kind of a signature event along those lines, the debates always work out pretty well. We try to do those once a semester as well, where we debate some historical issue. And anytime you have teachers going at it against one another, always makes for quite the battle royale or something. Okay. Then you can model all this stuff, but I think some students come out just for the spectacle of that as well.
I love it. I mean, there's some prep work involved there, but I think if I was a student at school, the idea, we always came out in droves for the student staff basketball game. Maybe it's a history nerd in me, but I would totally show up to hear, 2 of my teachers have a deep conversation about one of our most pressing topics. But I think with that in mind, we have another question that came in that I'm really curious about. Many teachers have raised the challenge of students raising topics that are explicitly banned by state law. Sorry. How do you handle conversations that might engage kids but run afoul of local politics or policies, rather? And this might be a thinker, so I'm gonna go with the person who has the brightest smile. That's gonna be Ed. You're on. What do you think?
Well, thankfully, I'm not in a position at this moment in my state where that is happening. So it hasn't happened with feet on the ground just yet, and hopefully will not. But I guess what I would do is just stick to the facts, state we have this law X, Y, and Z that says we can't talk about that. But you are a citizen of the United States, you're a citizen of democracy, and as a citizen, you have some options. So I would say, if here are some ways that you can express your voice in a productive manner. And I would just really encourage you to do some research, go to some primary sources, back your argument up with some evidence, and take skills that you've learned in your social studies classes and apply them. You are living history here. You're making the argument. You are choosing the pathway for our country as the next generation. So put your learning to good use. Now's your time.
Jayson, it seems to me, I'm in San Francisco, so everything you talk about is controversial, I guess, in the rest of the country. But
for the stories, yeah. It
seems to me that this trend recently to try to ban, it seems like the critical race theory in particular. It seems to me that those are approaches, methods, as opposed to the topics. And so, I don't know. I think some teachers have been terminated, at least before due process. So I don't know exactly the ins and outs locally, but I don't know too much of any topics historically that have been banned, if that makes sense. I think it's more the methods, which there's an understanding that suggests a predetermined position.
And Matt, I'm sorry, you're referencing your district. You're talking about the larger kind of.
I think largely where I think we've seen things like this banned recently in state legislatures.
There's been a few cases of specific topics in being banned. I don't want to. Please continue.
No. Well, I think the shortcut then too is probably if students raise it, then is it really illegal? So if you as a teacher are facilitating a broader conversation, I don't know if a student brought some scholarship to bear or something. I don't know if that violates the law. So but it just seemed to me that most of the stuff I've been paying attention to was kind of positioned as an approach, a disciplinary approach. And so
yeah, it's a tricky thing to nail down. It's been fluid. Like, I think, if you're someone who's dialed into local news and anger as me, I think you start to see these come up, and there's some things there that I think could be problematic for specific approaches. I think trying to nail down what works best for your locality is going to be tough. We have a conversation on the day 3 of this conference on really current events. And the hope is in that track and in that live discussion, we'll be able to kind of touch this more closely. But I do think it's one of those things that we all have to, as educators, kind of lean into and pay close attention, because as a profession, we all want to continue to grow and inspire as many students as possible. And sometimes these things kind of conflict with that. So I've got about 2 minutes left and one closing question for each of you. And I am super curious. I have been in the house for the last 18 months, short of going into Costco and fighting for toilet paper or, the grocery store. I've been mostly in the house. And I think in that time, a lot of my tried and true conversation skills have fallen by the wayside. So I am curious, as you welcome students back in the fall, what skills do you think they're going to need to grapple with? They're going to need to relearn in order to engage in the classroom community, to engage in these engaging conversations. And we can start off with Matt, and we can bump over to Ann.
Jason, I'm so sorry. Can you just quickly? I was reading the chat here. I was so sorry. Can you say that one more time?
You never read the chat. It's.
I know.
So pretty much, and we can start off with you just to give Matt a little bit of think time. Pretty much what I'm asking is, as students come back to you in the fall, like, what skills do you think they're really going to have to grapple with, relearn in order to engage in the classroom community in these engaging conversations?
I think that shift to a mindset of being more actively involved in their education, shifting away from that passive mindset of Zoom class where all the information comes off the computer and right to you. Just, more of the partner work, the small group work, I think is really going to help students get back into the idea that education is a communal process. I noticed that during times of online learning, a lot of the conversation was just about task completion. Did you do your work? Did your work done? Is your work turned in? It wasn't about like, is this education really making me a better person? Is this really important? Can I really apply this to the world and make my mark in a positive way? So I just really look forward to shifting that mindset and shifting that culture into a more active role for students.
Cool. Matt, about 30 seconds.
Eye contact.
Boom. Straight to the point.
Eye contact. As that's a constant though, probably.
As a frequent offender of avoiding eye contact, I respect that. Thank you guys for your time. That was fantastic.
Yes, I just want to echo that. Thank you all so much for such an engaging conversation. And perhaps even more importantly than helping students engage, I heard you say, let's get them comfortable in saying, I don't know. I thought that was so powerful. So thank you all. We appreciate you. All right, so if this discussion inspired you to comment and reflect more extensively, there are 2 ways to do just that. One is to join our after party discussion thread, which will be magically posted in the chat just from the sound of my voice and a magician named Kathy Hayes. And another way to engage is to visit the OC for SS general discussion forum on our site, ocforss.oerproject.com. It's a great place to share ideas and connect with others. And with that, we have one session left here on day 1 of the OER Conference for Social Studies. Our live discussion on arguments with evidence starts at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. And as always, please take a few seconds to share your feedback and answer our 2-question Zoom poll before you take a break. See you soon.